Hi everyone, I'm Frank Palmieri from Vietnam Air War, and today we have Terry here from the 18th SOS, straight from America. Hi Terry, how are you?
I'm fine, Frank. How are you? Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to be here too. I'm not too bad. Just having some technical difficulties this morning. Having tried to get the two computers to talk to each other is
I'm sure.
the miracles of modern technology.
Usually, I'm the one on my end that has the difficulty.
Oh yeah, I don't know why. Lately it's been playing up, but then again, I'm all the way in Australia and you're all the way in America, so we got to expect something to go wrong. All right, Terry. So please, can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you ended up joining the Air Force?
Well, Frank, uh, I'm living right now in South Bend, Indiana, which is the town I was born in. South Bend, Indiana is about 1 hour east of Chicago, Illinois, along Lake Michigan. And back in 1970, I was 20 years old. I was born in 1950. 1970, I was married, had a daughter, and they had the draft back then. And I was deferred from the draft with a student deferment. And when I quit school and got married, I lost that deferment. And the Army came back to draft me. My number passed, and they came back and got all the stragglers. So I got my letter telling me to go and have my physical in Chicago.
Yep.
Passed my physical in Chicago, and I got my letter to the Army saying I was to report to the Army on July 30th, 1970. I wasn't going to have any of that. I've always, growing up, I always wanted to be a pilot. That didn't work out. So I was going to be around aircraft one way or another. And I said, well, before I'm going to go into the Army, I'll join the Air Force. At least I can be around aircraft on the ground or maintenance or whatever. I wanted to be around the aircraft. So went down to the Air Force recruiter, joined on July 29th, which was the day before the Army had me. I asked the recruiter, you could do this? He says, oh yeah, we do that all the time. So I joined the Air Force one day before the Army. I went into the Air Force. I tested into the mechanical field, went into the Air Force, did my boot camp, my basic training at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas.
Yep.
Found out down there that I was going to be into what they call AFSC was 462 weapons mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to be on aircraft, loading bombs, missiles, and rockets, or whatever it took to arm up the F-4 Phantoms or whatever aircraft we were going to be assigned to. They shipped me out to Denver, Colorado, Lowry Air Force Base, which is where the 462 Weapons School was. I went there for 3 or 4 months, got sent to my first duty station, which was in Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico, Alamogordo, New Mexico, and loading weapons, guns and missiles and whatnot on F-4 Phantoms. I was part of the 49th Tactical Fighter Wing, 9th Tactical Fighter Squadron. And I was down there about 8 months or so and kind of came to the realization that Vietnam was going pretty heavy back then. F-4 Phantoms, bombs, missiles. I was going to be in Vietnam pretty darn soon. So I saw a bulletin on the bulletin board, and they were looking for volunteers for the 462 weapons mechanics to volunteer for airborne weapons mechanic, which meant a gunner on the gunships, fixed wing gunships. Well, I figured this was going to be, now that I was around aircraft on the ground, this is going to be my first chance, my best chance to get into the air. Not being a pilot, but at least I could get into the air. So I came back one morning, and told my crew, I said, well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to volunteer for gunships. And I'm going down to personnel right now. And nice knowing you guys. You're a great bunch of guys. Nice knowing you, but so long and good luck. As soon as I start walking away, one of my best buddies on the crew, John Wolf, said, whoa, wait a minute, wait for me. He says, you're going to go volunteer for gunships. I'm going to. So we said, okay, come on, John. Together we were going to go down to personnel and volunteer. We got about 10 yards away and we heard Joe Groszinski's a third member on my crew, said, wait a minute. You guys aren't going anywhere without me. So along comes Joe, and the three of us, we went down to personnel. We volunteered for gunship duty, all of the time thinking we were going to get the AC-130, which was a hot new kid on the block. The best, the greatest, and the latest, and the greatest in the gunship world. So we proceeded to go to our physiological training, which is basically high altitude chamber. And down at that school, which was at Cannon Air Force Base in New Mexico, we were looking at our orders and it said Palace Gunship 3, the Roman numeral 3. And we had no idea what that was all about. But some of the other guys were looking at their orders. Their orders said Palace Gunship 2,
Yep.
Roman numeral 2. Well, we didn't know what that was all about until one of the guys found out, oh, Palace Gunship 2 was the AC-130 Spectre gunships. Palace Gunship 3 was the AC-119 G or K at that time, Stinger gunships. And they looked at us and said, oh, you three are going to AC-119s. That's called the Flying Coffin. Well, they said, what are you talking about? We thought we were going to go to AC-130s. They said, no, not according to your orders. Gunship 3 is the AC-119s. So we kind of looked at each other and we said, oh boy, what did we get ourselves into? So anyhow, we finished up our high altitude chamber. We went to our flight school down at Hurlburt Field in Eglin, Florida, where all the special ops people, the gunships and the Jolly Green Giants and the A-1 Sky Raiders, that's where they were all being trained down at Hurlburt Field, which is an extension of Eglin Air Force Base down at Fort Walton Beach, Florida. We went down there for our flight training, which lasted about 3 or 4 months. Got out of our flight training. They sent us to our first survival school up at Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington, which is a basic survival school.
Mm-hmm.
They sent us up into the mountains for a few days, figure out how to survive, to give you a piece of parachute, because they figured if you landed in the ground after you bailed out, all you'd have is your parachute. So you had to figure out with a parachute how you made your shelter and everything else. And of course, it was in the middle of winter, December. You finished up that time up in the mountains, and then you went through a 1 mile obstacle course in the middle of the night after you came back out of the mountains. And at the end of that obstacle course, you were automatically caught and put into a training for a POW camp. And they put you into a simulated POW camp. And they showed you how to survive or make your way through that. They put you in isolation and did all kinds of crazy things that they would do in a POW camp. So we finished our survival training, the three of us at Fairchild, and immediately shipped out overseas to Clark Air Base in the Philippines. And that's where they would send you for your jungle survival school.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be, you figured you were going to go to Vietnam. The survival school in Fairchild wasn't going to do you much good, whereas the jungle survival school, which they called Snake School, that was going to prepare you for Vietnam. Again, they send you up into the mountains with a Negrito instructor, which Negrito is one of the mountain people, the indigenous people that lived up there. And they taught you how to survive on the jungle, how to get water, how to get food, how to hide, how to do this, whatever. And you spent a few days up in the jungle, and you finished your survival school up there, and got immediately shipped out to Vietnam. And that's where I ended up. My first duty station was at NKP, which stood for Nakhon Phanom, Thailand.
Yep.
In Thailand. That base was strictly all special ops. It was the base that nobody knew about. You had everything from A-1 Sky Raiders to the search and rescue HH-3 Jolly Green Giants to gunships to the O-1s, O-2s, OV-10 FACs. You had all the special ops things that were going in through Laos and Vietnam were coming out of NKP in Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
It was located right on the Mekong River, and other side of the Mekong River was Laos. So it was a short hop, wheels up from NKP over the river into Laos, and our Stinger gunships were equipped with 20 millimeter Vulcan cannons, which was an upgrade from the G model Shadows, so that we could hunt and do supply interdiction along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, all the way from the north, all the way down to the south. That's what we patrolled. That was our main duty out at NKP, was the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Sure.
So we could be flying anywhere from the north part, which was they called the barrel roll, the PDJ, the Plain of Jars, all the way down through the southern part, what they call the Steel Tiger. And each night, all night missions, we would fly, given a certain area to fly, a sector to fly, and we were vectored into that area and shoot up anything that we would see moving down the highway, down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, whether it be trucks or tanks, personnel or whatever. So basically that was our mission. For NKP was a short hop. It was very accessible to Laos. While I was there, the 56th Special Operations Wing had detachments. We started detachments at Da Nang, Vietnam, and Bien Hoa, Vietnam. And so my crew, which I was on a hard crew, a lot of guys were on crews that rotated in and out of crews. I was on pretty much the same crew the whole time. We would fly out of NKP for 30 days, do the Ho Chi Minh Trail thing, and then after 30 days, they would move us over to Da Nang in northern part of South Vietnam, fly missions out of there, which was a totally different mission, mostly what they call a TIC mission, a troops in contact.
Yep.
We would fly base perimeter, protecting the base from the 122 millimeter rockets that were being lobbed in every night. Or we would be called in for a troops in contact type mission, supporting the ground troops, whether it be Army, Marines, or whoever. If they felt that they needed help from a gunship, they would call us in, and we would give them fire support. We would fly out of Da Nang for 30 days. Our last mission out of Da Nang, we would not even return. We would go south to Bien Hoa in Vietnam, and southern part of South Vietnam, close to Tan Son Nhut Air Base, close to Saigon. And again, we would fly missions out at Bien Hoa for 30 days. Again, a different type of mission. Mostly when I was down there, they had Tet of 72. And I don't know if a lot of people remember or heard about Tet of 72. They always think of Tet of 68 as the big one. But they did have a Tet of 72. And so we were flying a lot of support missions from the areas, towns and villages and hamlets around fire bases around Bien Hoa in support of Tet of 72 in defense of those areas. So we would fly 30 days out of Bien Hoa and back up to NKP and make that cycle again. I called it the Devil's Triangle. NKP to Da Nang, down to Bien Hoa, back to, and every 30 days we would fly that triangle. So basically that's it. I finished up my year in Vietnam, got taken off of flight status because Vietnam was ending right then, the end of 72, beginning of 73, and put back on the ground as a 462 weapons mechanic, and they sent me to Grand Forks Air Force Base in North Dakota, loading nuclear-tipped missiles, SRAM missiles on B-52 Stratofortresses. So that's where I finished up my 4 years, and that's when I got out.
Well, you got out in one piece, which is always the best.
Well, it wasn't the best of places, I must say. I dreamt about people getting duty stations like England and Spain and wonderful places like that, Nellis Air Force Base, Las Vegas. I never got some of those choice duties from Vietnam. I went from Vietnam. It was 98 degrees above zero in December of 72. And by the time I got to Grand Forks, it was minus 30 degrees below zero. It was quite a shock. That's where John and Joe and I split up. We had been together ever since New Mexico, at Howman, for all through our training and all through our 1 year. We've been together for probably 2.5 years.
Yep.
John and Joe opened up their orders, and they got to go to Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas.
Oh.
Unfortunately, I don't think I must have made somebody angry because they sent me to Grand Forks in North Dakota. And if you would have seen a grown man cry, you would have been able to see me cry.
Oh dear. So tell me about the AC-119. How did that develop into a gunship? Because, like you said, people normally think of the gunship as the C-130.
Well, as I said earlier, it was Gunship 3. So Gunship 2, we were actually the third program going. Gunship 2 was the AC-130s. And that was the new kid on the block. That was the hot thing going.
Mm-hmm.
And the Air Force is going to give the earlier Gunship 1 was the AC-47. Everybody knows them as the Puff the Magic Dragon, spooky AC-47. They did a hell of a job, bang up job, but as the Air Force usually thinks, bigger is better. They wanted something bigger to fly along the trail, to hunt the trail.
Yep.
More wider time, last longer on target, so they needed a bigger airplane. So they went to Gunship 2 program, which was the AC-130 Spectre. So they're getting ready to hand over, or thinking about handing over the AC-47s to the South Vietnamese Air Force. Lo and behold, they had a trouble of getting enough AC-130s to be put online.
Mm-hmm.
The C-130s that were in service at the time were in great demand because they were all over the world flying material, personnel, you name it. They could not spare them to be taken and converted to gunships. And Lockheed could not provide enough airframes of the C-130s to convert them into AC-130s, so they ran into a problem.
Yep.
And the problem was, what do we do? Do we pull the AC-47s back and not give them to the South Vietnamese? Or do we do something else? So they said, well, let's look around, see what we've got. They looked at the inventory, and they went out. They found these old C-119s that were Korean War vintage cargo planes.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of paratrooping type stuff, guys jumping out of them or delivering supplies in Korea. And there was an Air National Guard base right here in my home state of Indiana, Bacalar Air Base down in Columbus, Indiana, that was flying the C-119s. And they said, well, what if we took that platform, converted it into a gunship?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it seemed like it had plenty of room in the cargo compartment. And so that's what they ended up doing. So as a stopgap measure, until they could get enough C-130s to convert into the AC-130s, they took 26 G models and 26 K model C-119s and converted them into the AC-119G Shadows and the AC-119K Stinger gunships. And all they were supposed to be was a bridge between the AC-47 until they could get enough AC-130s. And as soon as they got those 130s, the 119s would go away, go back to the boneyard, go back wherever. It was the end of it. Well, we did such a great job, they decided not to delete us. They kept us there. So from a stopgap emergency measure, we ended up lasting 4 to 5 years
Mm-hmm.
in active duty in Vietnam.
Yep.
Flying the trail and in support of troops in contact. So when you look at the linear evolution, it goes from AC-47 to AC-130 Gunship 2.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, you have this little bump out.
Sorry, Terry. I think you've knocked your camera because I'm looking at your elbow.
Uh-oh. There you go. Sorry.
Oh, it's all right. Oh, that's better.
See, I was
concentrating there we go again.
I wasn't watching my camera. How's that? A little bit better?
Oh, yeah, far more interesting.
Okay. I get excited. I hit the desk, and I think it fell down a little bit. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right.
So anyway, from a stopgap measure, it ended up they kept them all the way to the end of the war, which is 1973.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave all of our AC-119s over to the South Vietnamese Air Force and did not bring any of them home. So we got deactivated as the 18th Special Operations Squadron, gave our airplanes over, trained the Vietnamese, and we got sent home, and I got sent home subsequently, back on the ground on B-52s.
It's really funny. I live here in Melbourne, and there's an airport not too far away from me, and I'm being buzzed by planes this morning.
Is that right?
Yeah. I think there's some helicopters flying over, so it's making the tape more realistic.
What kind of helicopters, do you know? Black Hawks, what?
No. They're probably police helicopters.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Actually, the police helicopters are equipped with FLIR and everything here. They're pretty advanced. So tell me, the AC-119 Stinger, describe the plane. What kind of engines and guns did they mount on and equipment?
Well, the original AC-119G model, the Shadows,
Mm-hmm.
they had two Wright R3350s radial engines.
Yep.
And they had these big four-bladed Aero Products propellers on them. But we were so overloaded, even though the G model only had the 4 miniguns, it didn't have any 20-millimeter Vulcan cannons.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it had the 4 miniguns with all the extra ammunition, it was so overloaded that it had a hard time getting off the ground. And if you lost an engine on takeoff, you weren't going to make it. You were going to go off the end of the runway. Or if you had a problem, and they were having problems with them big Aero Products propellers, if you had a runaway prop, you were going to go into the ground. So that was the big drawback of the G model Shadow,
Mm-hmm.
was that not only did it not have enough firepower to be able to go do missions along the Ho Chi Minh Trail and hunt trucks, it was great for troops in contact with the 4 miniguns, but it also had problems of being overweight, and the climb rate of only 200 feet per minute was just totally unacceptable. But so that's when they came up with the K model. The K model, they added 2 General Electric J85 jet pods outboard of the recep engines. With the recep engines at 3,000 horsepower apiece, and they added those J85s, which was probably another almost 3,000 pounds of thrust each. It allowed them to put more weight on the aircraft. That's where they added the 20-millimeter Vulcan cannons.
Mm-hmm.
They added more equipment for avionics, like the FLIR, the forward-looking infrared radar, and this side-tracking radar. They added different equipment, overloaded it even more, but with the J85s, it allowed it to get off the ground, and they changed the 4-bladed Aero Products props to the 3-bladed Hamilton standard prop, which is a more reliable prop. You didn't have any runaway props like we did, at least I didn't the whole year I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't have any problems. It kind of took care of it. Not only were we able to carry more weight, more guns, more ammunition, but it made it safer on takeoff and landing with the added J85 jet engine pods. Like I said, the 4 miniguns on the G and the K model Stinger, they could fire 6,000 rounds a minute at high rate of speed.
Mm-hmm.
You could switch them to a lower rate of speed, about 4,000 rounds a minute, but it depended if you were trying to save ammunition or if you wanted to cover a bigger area with more ammunition.
Sure.
So at 6,000 rounds a minute at 4 guns, we had 4 of them. That's 4 times 6, that's 24,000 rounds a minute if you put all 4 on the line at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So we added, like I said, the 20-millimeter Vulcan cannons on the K model. Those guns would run at 2,500 rounds a minute. So you had another 5, if you put both of them on the line, you had another 5,000 rounds a minute added to the 24,000. If you put all 6 guns on the line at the same time, that's 29,000 rounds a minute. So that's a lot of ammunition going down in a short period of time, in a hurry, and it would cover a big area. There were a few times when we did put all 6 guns on the line. Not very often, because the pilot wanted to save the ammunition. I mean, you didn't want to run through all your ammunition within a
Sure.
few minutes and be finished. So, he would use it judiciously. But if you were towards the end of your mission, whether it be low on fuel, what they call bingo fuel, where you had to return to base, or you might say, oh, he might call back to the gunners, say, put all 6 guns on the line. Let's empty this thing out down on the trail, and maybe we'll get something. And never know. But all 6 guns on the line, that's 29,000 rounds a minute. And needless to say, it was a little bit loud back in that gun compartment. And but it was an experience, put it that way.
So the crew of these planes, can you describe the roles of the crew?
Absolutely. The Shadow, the G model Shadow, had an 8-man crew. Okay. For the 4 miniguns, they had 2 gunners, 2 of them. When they added the 20 millimeters on the K model, they had to add 1 gunner.
Yep.
Plus, they added the FLIR, the forward-looking infrared radar, on the K model. So they had to add 1 navigator to operate that.
Sure.
Besides the nav. You had 3 navigators. You had a table nav, what they called a table nav. He would get you to the target area. You had another navigator operating the NOS, what they call the NOS, which is the night observation site. And you had the 3rd navigator operating the FLIR, forward-looking infrared radar. So you had 3 navigators. At the addition of 1 gunner and 1 navigator made the crew 10. So you're up to 10-man crew. Pilot, co-pilot, 3 navigators, flight engineer, 3 gunners. You added a gunner because of the 20 millimeters, and you had your IO, which is the illuminator operator, which made a 10-man crew.
A crowded plane.
Yeah, crowded. Especially back in that gun compartment when you got all 3 gunners and the IO back there, and then you added the NOS operator, which is in the forward part of that gun compartment, operating the NOS out of that forward door, open door.
Sure. So, on your missions, your biggest enemy in those missions would have been the flak from the from the ground, wouldn't they?
Yeah, we called it AAA. AAA stood for anti-aircraft artillery. Especially when you were flying the trail, pretty much every night you were going to get incoming from the ground.
Sure.
So what we did was we had 3 gunners. We kept 2 gunners to operate the guns, reload them, repair them as needed, whatever applied to the guns. You had 2 guys working the guns. And we took the 3rd gunner, which more often than not seemed like it was me, would put him in the left rear door. All these doors are open, by the way. There's no real doors, just door openings. They would put this, and they would call him, he would be from gunner to scanner. And what he would do, he would go back to that open door where the illuminator was, situate himself between the illuminator and the door, strap himself into his parachute harness, and pretty much hang out that door. That he could visualize from the nose of the aircraft to all the way to the back of the aircraft on the left side. In the meantime, the illuminator operator was doing the same thing on the right side. There was another door opening on the right clamshell door that the illuminator door put in a flare launcher. He would situate himself between the flare launcher and that door opening and call AAA calls on the right side.
Sure.
But the problem was most of the AAA was being sighted when you looked at it was coming from the left side, which is the door I would have been in. Can I show you a picture here?
Of course, please.
I have props. Hey, this is top stuff here. I don't know if you can.
Oh well, we're not. Oh wow, is that yours truly? Is it?
That's me.
Fantastic.
I'm in that left rear door, clamshell door.
Yeah. Just
and
pop
I'm
that photo
situated.
straight at me, mate. Straight at me.
Huh?
Turn it a bit to your left. Perfect, perfect. Yeah, I can see it.
Got it.
Yeah, oh yeah, I can see it. Okay, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
And I'm situated. Of course, I'm on the ground here. This is before we take off.
Sure.
But there's a strap that goes across that door. You see my arms over that strap.
Yep.
And there's another strap that I would hook to my parachute harness. And I would lean out on that strap to be able to see the front of the nose of the aircraft all the
Yep.
way to the rear. So if I saw AAA, and at night it was easy to see,
Mm-hmm.
you would be able, of course, it's all dark. The ground is dark. You have no idea what you're looking at down there. But you would be able to see muzzle flashes. Boom, muzzle flashes from the ground. As soon as you saw those muzzle flashes, you knew there would be tracer following right behind it. And the job of the scanner was to evaluate whether or not that tracer was a threat
Mm-hmm.
to your aircraft. You would, in constant communication with the pilot, you would tell the pilot something like, pilot, I got AAA 9 o'clock, no sweat,
Mm-hmm.
not a threat. So he'd want to know that. Or if it was a threat, you would call a brake. You might call to the pilot, brake right or brake left. Whatever you had to do to avoid that an aircraft fire and AAA, you called a brake. As soon as you called a brake, that pilot would lay it over left or right, whatever it was you were calling. He would never ask you, are you sure? Or is it that close? No. As soon as you called that brake, he trusted that scanner. He would lay it over. Now you're already in a 30-degree left-hand bank.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in that 30-degree left-hand firing orbit, you're already leaned over left to 30 degrees to the left. So if you called a left brake, he was going to snap it over to like 90 degrees.
Wow.
So you had to hang on. Of course, I knew to hang on because I was calling the brake,
Yep.
or the scanner was calling the brake. Problem was the gunners in the gun compartment might be carrying off a can of ammo off that rack over to a gun to refeed it, and a can of ammunition weighed about 120 pounds. Once you snapped it over like that, all of a sudden those G forces would grab that can and drag you right down to the floor.
Mm.
Or if you called a right-hand brake, you say right hand, brake right, brake right, brake right. He's going from a 30-degree left-hand bank maybe to a 90-degree right-hand bank. All of a sudden, that poor gunner in the back, if he's got a can of ammunition in his arms, all of a sudden he's pulling negative G's. It goes up, and then it catches up to positive G's and comes back slamming them down to the floor. So it could be quite an experience for the gunners in the back when the scanner's calling brakes and the pilot's laying it over like that to miss AAA. So it got, and it reminds you, everything's dark. There's no lights in that back compartment. You are working literally in the dark.
Wow.
You had a couple work lights on each gun
Mm-hmm.
that were red light bulbs, so as not to give off any white light.
Yes.
So you were literally working in the dark. You had wind blowing it from front to back because everything was open.
Mm-hmm.
All doors were open. All openings were open. There were no windows. And in front of the front gun, you had vents that would allow air to come through the compartment to blow out the smoke. So everything's windy, dark, and you're pulling G's, 30-degree left banks to right banks, you name it, and it got pretty hairy.
It sounds like a roller coaster ride from hell.
Basically, it was a roller coaster ride. To this day, I'm not sure how I got any knees left, because if a can of ammunition drags you down to the floor like that during a break, you'd go down immediately. And luckily, I didn't know anybody that ever got hurt, but the possibility was surely there. So
Sure.
That's what it was every night. You were pretty much getting AAA. Not too often did we ever go on a mission that we didn't get shot at. I mean, the Ho Chi Minh was, believe me, it was well defended, and anywhere from 23 millimeter to 37 millimeter to 57 millimeter AAA, and Our only hope was that obviously they fired tracer at us, just like we fired tracer down, that we could spot the tracer and make an evasive maneuver so that we didn't get shot down.
Well, did they lose many planes over Vietnam?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Did they lose many planes over Vietnam?
We only lost one to ground fire. That's not to say we had a few got hit by ground fire, but they made it back to base.
Sure.
But we only lost one to ground fire, which was Stinger 41, and that was over An Lac and over next to Tan Son Nhut, or close to Tan Son Nhut, in southern Vietnam.
Yep.
We lost 3 crew members on that. 7 bailed out and survived.
Sure.
And that I remember that one like it happened yesterday. It was the 2nd of May, 1972, and I was on the mission. We were flying out of Benoit, and I know, Frank, I don't know how to tell you this, but our airplane, other than the 3-tone camouflage on the top side, was painted black on the underside. Painted all black because we flew night missions. But An Lac was right in the middle of 72, and it was in the process of being overrun. So they decided to try to defend that area around the clock. Around the clock meant daylight missions. Somebody higher up thought it would be a good idea to take our AC-119 Stinger gunships, a big black airplane flying at low speed at a low altitude against a pretty blue sky. We were a sit and duck. So I flew on a mission prior to Stinger 41 getting shot down on the same target, or almost the same target. I was scanning, calling AAA, but we were a sitting duck. I couldn't see the AAA because, like I said, at nighttime you could see that tracer's really, really good and can make evasive maneuvers. But during the daytime you couldn't see that tracer. And by the time I could see it, I could hear it. And by the time you could hear it, it'd be too late.
Yes, of course.
And so my co-pilot's calling and says he's got tracers going right by his windows. He can hear it. It crackles. I mean, we were dead to rights. That gunner had us down there. I think it was a quad 4-barrel 23 millimeter, which is very fast ammunition, very fast velocity. And we were getting hosed. We bingo fuel, pulled off the target. On the way out, back to base, back to Benoit, Stinger 41 was coming in to replace us on the same target. And by the time we were wheels down at Benoit and landed and went for our debriefing, we had heard the Stinger 41 had already got shot down. So it could have just as well have been us. But with the grace of God, we got by it. It didn't happen, and we got lucky. And after Stinger 41 was shot down, they decided, well, somebody in the up the chain of command said, maybe that's not such a good idea, flying this big black airplane in daylight. And that was the last mission, which unfortunately it cost the lives of a few people by the time somebody got wise to it and came to their senses. But it really wasn't a good situation. The pilot of that Stinger 41, his name was Terry Courtney. Once his aircraft got hit, it started to flip over on its back. He pretty much stayed with the aircraft until everybody could get out and bail out, and he pretty much flew it into the ground. And he was awarded the Air Force Cross over that, which he was put in for the Medal of Honor, but they didn't give him the Medal of Honor, but they gave him the second highest award, which was the Air Force Cross. So.
Sure.
But that's all part of war, I guess. That's all part of the deal. Some people make some bad decisions, and some people have to pay. But I don't want to get into that. But anyway.
No. Well, thank you so much. That was really enlightening. You got a few props you said you wanted to show us.
Oh yeah.
Now I can see you've got a couple of books there too.
Yeah, that's it. That's my gunship book. by somebody named Wayne Mutza.
Yep.
To me, that's the best gunship book out there. It tells you everything, the history of the gunships from the AC-47 all the way up to the AC-130s.
Lovely.
I have the book here, which is the Gunship Chronicles. And it's
every good library needs one.
The author is by Larry Barbie. He's one of the navigators that was on the Stinger 41 gunship that got shot down.
Yep.
I'm going to send you this book.
Thank you.
As soon as I get one signed by Larry Barbie, I'll go ahead and send it to you.
Wow.
Anyway, there's a couple props. This is my original survival knife that we carried on our belt on our side.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the other survival knife that we had. There's a switchblade.
Mm-hmm.
And we carried it in our flight suit, tied it off with a parachute cord. And the other part of this is this hook on this side.
Okay.
We would use this if we were down in a parachute, stuck in a tree, and we needed to cut ourselves up. We would use this hook, cut our lines. Or if we were coming down in the parachute, we could cut a line or two to help direct our parachute in one direction or another. But this is another one. This is another original. Still has the original parachute cord that was tied to our belt. Put in our pocket, was tied to our belt in case we reached for it and it slipped out of our hand. We wouldn't lose it forever.
Yeah, good thinking.
Yeah, I wanted to show you this though. I don't know if you can see it very good.
Yeah, I can see it now. It's perfect.
This is a little Sanyo flashlight.
Yeah.
That we all carried. And like I said, the gun compartment was all blackened out. There was no light. So if you had to work on a gun, whether it be reloading it or repairing it in flight, we had these little rechargeable flashlights. Had a red lens here, right here.
Yep.
We would flick it on. It doesn't work anymore, but we flick it on that red lens, and we would hold it in our mouth. That's how we worked on a gun. From this little light, holding it in our mouth.
Yep.
While we were working on it on a gun in the dark. And with G forces and everything else working on us, this is what we used. And it's mine because it still has my teeth marks in it.
No.
Right here. And if somebody wanted to check, it probably could be proved that it's my DNA. So this is my flashlight. And we use it every night.
Yep.
After a mission, I'll take it back to the barracks and I'll plug it in, recharge it for the next night. But almost every crew member had this little Sanyo flashlight, and I still have my original one. Looks a little rough right now.
Impressive.
I wanted to show you that.
No, that's great. Look, thanks so much for your insight there, Terry. And you're a great narrator. It looks like you've done this before. On behalf of everyone here at Vietnam Air War, thank you so much for your great service, and thank you for letting us have a better insight into what you guys did in Vietnam.
Well, thank you for having me on. I'm always trying to promote the gunship that I was on because we don't get some of the notoriety that maybe the AC-130 or the AC-47 gets. So every chance I get, it's good to enlighten the people of what the AC-119 was all about.
No worries. Well, thank you so much, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you.
No worries.